Hi there, and welcome to a video that I am making. It's kind of part of a tutorial series that I'm planning for doing map creation and how to do all that sort of stuff. Tabletop simulator. So today, what I'm kind of going through is actually a little bit like tangential from actually creating a map in Tabletop Simulator. This is more how we can deal with custom objects and assets in Tabletop Simulator and use them for our Star Wars Legion maps. So to give you some more detail on this, let me go ahead and just show you some of the map packs that I really like to use, or not map packs, asset packs that I really like to use for map creation and stuff like that. So we've got the Star Wars RPG Assets mod. This one is really good. It's got a ton of assets. It's got literally so many assets that it can actually be kind of slow to load in. But it's really great for just all sorts of Star Wars assets, etc. And then I am a big fan of these SOTS asset packs, SAUGHT. Um, he's got a lot of really good stuff. These are mostly for D&D, but depending on the world or the map that you're creating, they can be really, really handy for our Legion maps as well. And the last one is just Cobalt Cafe here. This one's a really solid one. There's a few others that I use for like various bits and pieces, but those are like the big packs in terms of like they've got a ton of things that you can work with, like from a single pack standpoint. So, what I wanted to go over today is basically an issue that can occur in our Legion maps, which is that sometimes you can run into grid projection issues and stuff like that. And I guess to show that off, one second, I'm going to go ahead and spawn in some random stuff here. It's in here, but I'm pull this out here. Let's see. Okay, so when you play a game of Star Wars Legion, we know that when you oh, I guess let me some set up here, go to spawn card decks. So I want to spawn the deployment zones to kind of show you the issue. And this happens for range bands as well. But let's go to rollout here, spawn these. Okay, so when you've got these deployment zone markers up, or when you've got a mini that has its range bands or like cohesion bands spawned up, what it does is it does something basically like grid projection, where it will cast an overlay of basically like this tinted color across the surfaces of everything on the map. And so you'll notice that for normal objects, like this is the normal color for the object, but when you spawn those range bands or those deployment zones, it will actually pass that color onto the object. But that's not true in all cases. There are some objects where that does not occur. And let me see if I can find an example really quick of one that doesn't happen. Ah, here we go. Okay, so this fallen tree trunk, you'll notice that there's no coloration on this trunk as it occurs. And that can be really annoying if you've got, like, let's say that we had a really, really large cliff face here that we were trying to, do grid projection on. If this thing was this big and then nothing was being, no deployment zones or range bands would work on it, then that could be really frustrating from a play perspective. And so let's go ahead and to kind of get some more details on that, let's go ahead and look at the custom details for this fallen tree trunk. And you'll notice here that this is a custom model here. So we actually have access to the model, the mesh, the diffuse, the collider, all of those sorts of things when it comes to this fallen tree trunk. And I would be willing to bet that if we were to, let me go ahead and just pull up the image here. So basically what I'm doing is I'm just copying and pasting the diffuse image link, and I'm just going to go over to a browser here and paste that link. Now, if we were to hit save image as, so we'll just call this trunk. So this is a trunk PNG here. And if we were to, let's see here, let me just go ahead and try, let's just use the trunk PNG. We'll use the local file. We're not going to bother uploading it. So it's still the same issue, but if we were to go into GIMP, for instance, which GIMP is a photo editing software. If you have Adobe, you know, you that, for instance, it's, you know, whatever comfortable with. But if we were to open that up real quick here, so let's just open this. So, oh wait, no, that's not the right. Convert. So in GIMP, yeah, well, it's just converting the RGBs. So we're going to export this image again. We're going to export it as, sometimes you need to export them as JPEGs, but we're just going to try and do it as a PNG. Basically, the thing that can cause this issue is just, it's a formatting issue for the texture itself. So once you reformat the texture, it will often work. So let's just see if that worked here. I did not. So let me try exporting it as a JPEG instead. So we'll go export as, and then select file type. We're going to JPEG. Okay. And this is going to be trunk 3 because we're just, you know, messing around with it. 3 exports. Okay. Let's go back to this. And let's try with trunk 3 now. Local. Oh, it's still not working. Well, that's interesting. Well, sometimes you're just going to have issues like that. And I guess this is a great example of, you know, even with some tricks that you have to work with, it can still be tough to sometimes get things to play nice. And sometimes you just got to use other assets. So in this case, or you can just be okay with it not being able to do any grid projection. Oh, does it have grid projection on? Let me see. I don't think that matters, but no, it doesn't. Okay. Well, it's not going to do anything. So there's probably a way to fix it, and I may have done something slightly incorrect here. Believe that worked there. Trunk 3, local, import. There we go. Okay, for some reason it didn't import earlier. I may have hit the X button. So if you convert it to a JPEG there, it should be able to, at the very worst, sometimes you can still keep it as a PNG. It depends on the formatting of the PNG, like I said. Sometimes you can keep it as that, but in this case, we did have to convert it to a JPEG. But once you do that, you'll notice that the range bands and stuff will start working. So that's one kind of trick that you can do to work with assets like that. But let's say that we have a slightly different asset. So let me go to, where is my, okay, let's try this here. So I know I've got some stuff in here that won't play nice. Okay, so we've got some cliff objects in this map pack that I really like. I think that the resolution on the textures is really nice. They already have quite nice hitboxes. Like, they're pretty friendly for Legion type stuff because, well, I mean, these are really big. We would have to scale them down. But if we were to use these in Legion, you know, it's like fairly flat up at the top, and then fairly steep cliff faces, but they're also not just like flat cliff faces, so they could provide some interesting cover. So these are like some really cool objects that we could use, right? Well, let's go ahead and take a look at those with the range projection, or the grid projection here. And they have that exact same issue as what this fallen trunk was having earlier. So you might imagine that, oh, we can just right click, go into custom, and edit the diffusing image. Oh, wait. So there's something a little bit different about this object, which is that it's a custom asset bundle. And custom asset bundles are a pain in the butt for us to deal with because the only thing that you can actually change is the link to the asset bundle. What a custom asset bundle is it's actually a Unity 3D file that has been compiled and built in Unity and then imported over to Tabletop Simulator because Tabletop Simulator runs on Unity. So it can import these files, or at least it Tabletop Simulator has the Unity what whatever it's called, web player, so that it can import import Unity assets. I don't remember if it's built on Unity. I'm pretty sure it is built on Unity. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. The point is that this object is a lot harder to work with because it's a custom asset bundle. And there are some tricks to work around this, but they're a lot more complicated than what we were doing with the fallen tree trunk here. But if you've got an object like this that is really cool and it's really handy to work with, like, and you know, you really want to use this asset, then there's a few ways that you can do this. Well, there is a way that I have discovered that you can do this. I don't know, there's probably a few ways, but okay. So you're going to need a few things, though, a few other programs in order to get this to work. The first program that you're going to need is something called Tiny Ripper, which is, or Tiny Ripper, which is something you can find on SourceForge. I'll probably share the link in the video description for this here. But basically, it is a program that is designed for turning a Unity 3D asset into its component assets. So it's like its textures, its model files, etc., etc. Because a Unity 3D file is already compiled, right? We can't work with that in things like Blender or in things, you know, in other 3D editing softwares and stuff like that. So we have to find a way to decompile that basically to its component assets. So that's what Tiny Ripper is for. The second thing that we're going to need is actually Unity itself. And I'm not going to show in this video how to set up Unity. It's pretty simple. Like it's basically just a matter of going to Unity's site, getting the community version, and then installing it on your computer. It's pretty straightforward. You're not going to need anything of a complicated setup for any of that stuff. And the last thing you're going to need is also Blender. So you're going to need those three things. And like I said, I'm not really going to show how to set those up or install it. I mean, Tiny Ripper is just a matter of downloading this zip file, uncompressing the zip file, and then running the exe. So it's pretty simple. I can show you actually here. So I just, you know, unwrapped the zip file here, and then you just run the Tiny Ripper here. So actually, I guess I can go ahead and get started on. So now that you know what you need Tiny Ripper, you need Blender, and you need Unity. So let's go ahead and start unpacking this file here. So we're going to go back to Tabletop Simulator here. We're going to go to Custom. We need to copy this link here for this Unity 3D file. So then we can go to our web browser and then just type this in here, and we're going to hit Save File. Okay. So now it's going to be in our Downloads folder. This thing right here. I'm going to go ahead and rename it because that name is a doozy. So we're just going to call it Cliff Assets. Okay, and you can notice that it is a Unity 3D file. So now what we need to do is we need to go over to Tiny Ripper, and all you have to do is drag and drop this Unity 3D file here. And it's going to automatically export these to its component assets. Now you're going to see a bunch of junk here that doesn't really make any sense. Don't worry too much about it. All you got to do is hit export here. And you can export it to whatever folder you like. It doesn't really matter. I've already got a folder set up in my downloads called Asset Exports, so I'm going to go ahead and export it there. And now, if we go to Asset Exports, we have this cliffassets.unity3d folder here. And it's going to have all its component assets in these various different folders. So this is probably like the model or the mesh inside this. And then we've got some textures and some other cool things. So in the case of this cliff, you'll notice that all we have is a single cliff texture. And so that means that we actually have a really easy job in terms of exporting and importing this back to Tabletop Simulator. So we're going to go ahead and go to the next step, which is that we need to start opening these things in Unity. So once you have Unity installed, you just have to hit go to Unity. Oh, whoops, I didn't mean to open that. You just have to go to your Unity hub, and you can just create a new project here. So I don't really need this because I'll just do it from scratch so that you guys can kind of see what I'm doing here. But all you're going to do is need to create a new project here. You'll just do 3D. It doesn't really matter what project you select. Oh, it end up opening. So we're going to do that, and then we're going to call it, and we're going to put it into my downloads. And then we'll just create a new folder, which is Unity Project. Unity Project. Hiya. So go ahead and select that folder, and I'm just going to name it Cliff project. It doesn't, you don't have to name, it doesn't, the naming literally is irrelevant. It doesn't matter. You can do whatever you want. And you're not going to have to do this for every single asset, right? All you have to do is create a single Unity project. And then once you import the package that you need to deal with all this stuff, you can just kind of import those assets into that project and then export them as necessary. The only reason that we have to actually build a project in Unity is just so that we can get into the editor. Because all we're using for Unity in this point is just to export an asset. So we're going to go ahead and open up Unity here. So there's one other thing that you're going to need in Unity before you can actually start playing with all this stuff. And so you're going to have to go to your package manager here. You're going to make sure that you're going in the Unity registry. So you're looking at all public packages here. And then we're going to go to FBX exporter here. Going to make sure that we need this to be installed. So we're going to go ahead and install that. So basically, it's going to add FBX exporter to our Unity project that we've just created. So to this Cliff project. And that's what I'm saying, where you only need one Unity project. Once you have this thing set up, you can just save this project and open it for exporting any asset that you want in the future. I just called it Cliff project. Maybe that was a bad naming convention. So, okay, we don't need these cameras or these lights. It doesn't matter. So what we're going to go ahead and do now is we are going to, do you remember that folder that we had exported from uTinyRipper? We're going to go ahead and actually just click and drag that folder into our assets. And you can see now that we have all those assets in our Unity. And if we go down to asset bundles, assets, you know, all these various paths, you'll see here that we've got some interesting looking objects now in the root folder. And so let's go ahead and just import this thing here. So it's going to look pink because it doesn't have a texture applied. That's fine. Don't worry about it. But you can see that this is the object that we were looking for, right? It has that same shape. It's, you know, that's what we're looking for. It just doesn't have a texture applied. And that's exactly what we need here. So what we're actually going to do is we are going to click on this object. So make sure that you have that object selected. And then you're going to go down to your assets. And this is what you needed from the FBX exporter package. That once you have that package added to your project, it's going to add an option under your assets menu here to convert to FBX prefab variant. We're going to go ahead and click that. And we're just going to call it Cliff, because I don't know, we don't have 3 cliffs right now. So so do that. And then so you're going to make sure that you want to browse into the folder that you're going to want to export to. So go ahead and copy this path. You can try and set a new path. I've tried doing that before, but for some reason, sometimes it doesn't work. So I'm just going to go down to, so we can go to asset exports here, select this. For some reason, it doesn't let you select folders that are outside of your project space in Unity. So we're just going to go ahead and copy this and export it to our assets. Do this, do that. So that's all you need to do. One last thing is that you need to make sure that you're exporting in a binary format. And that's just so that we can work with it in Blender easier. So we're going to export in binary, and then all you got to do is click convert. Names of objects in the hierarchy may change with the compatible naming. That's fine. Don't worry about it. Turn off and continue. Okay, so now if just make sure that you have that path copied for where that asset got exported to. So we're going to go ahead and I'm going to go ahead and show that off here. So we go to that path here. You should see at the path that you exported to a new file called, you know, Cliff FBX or whatever you decided to name it. And now we are done with Unity for the time being. That's all we needed from Unity. So now we're going to go into our Blender. And the only thing that we need Blender for in this case is for converting from an FBX to converting to an OBJ file, an object file. And the reason we have to do that is that TTS only natively supports OBJ files for certain custom assets. So unless you're doing a custom asset bundle, you need to convert it to an object file here, a wavefront. So we're going to go ahead and click import here, FBX. Make sure that you have that path that I was talking about earlier copied so that you can just go here. And now we're going to import cliff.fbx. Hey, look at that. That's our cliff. So at this point, all we have to do is just select this object, select file, export, wavefront, object. And now we'll just go back to this folder here. I'll just call it cliff object. Okay. Okay, so now let's go back to TTS here, and let's just show you what we've gotten at this point. So if we go into objects, components, custom, model, and spawn one of these, it's going to give us some options for importing. So we're going to go ahead and select the file folder here, go to our cliff object that we just exported. So this is what I just exported from Blender. So we're going to select this. We're just going to keep it local for now. You can upload it to the cloud later, because you will need to upload it to the cloud for other players to be able to see it. But we're just going to keep our files local for now, just because I've already, done some of this stuff before and it doesn't really matter. So now we can see, hey, look at that. We actually have a cliff object, and you can see that it's the same script and all that stuff. Sorry, it's the same shape and all that stuff. And it's looking great. It is a little shiny right now. We'll worry about that later. It's not that big of a deal. And the one last thing that we also need to do is get its texture. So as far as the texture is concerned, we were actually pretty lucky with this cliff, because this cliff is an example of an object that's using a single texture file for its texture. So we can actually really easily deal with this by just going to custom here, select diffuse image, go to that path where everything was exported again, go back here, go to texture 2D, and this is the texture file right here. So this is just what you got from UTinyRipper. It's just an image file. All you got to do is click open. We'll just select local for now, like I said. And hey, look at that. That is our cliff. So you'll notice that it's really shiny right now. That has to do with the TTS material that is being used right now. So all you've got to do is set your specular intensity to 0, set the specular sharpness and Fresnel strength down to 0. You can let it cast shadows or not. It's not a big deal. And now that we've got it done like that, we can see that we have our object imported. There are some slight differences in visual things. So it's like a little bit more gray on this one and a little bit more brown on this one. I think that might have to do with, yeah, it's just to deal with. It's probably a shader issue for the custom asset. Not the end of the world. Like, this is certainly a workable object. And you'll notice now that our object actually has these range bands and projections cast over it. And that is exactly what we wanted from this object. So let's go ahead and see. You'll notice here actually though, that now that we've imported this object, so if we were using this old cliff before, it may not have had projections cast over it, but the hitboxes on it were actually pretty good. And now you may notice that now that we've imported it as a different object, there's something a little funky going on here with our Legion minis, which is that they are just kind of floating over the air. They're not actually colliding with the object very well. And the reason for that is that we haven't actually set a collider yet on our object. We're going to go ahead and copy paste the link from our model mesh into our collider. What that means is that we're basically trying to use the exact shape of this object as our collision detection for this object. So we're going to go ahead and hit collider here, and then we'll lock it again. Let's see how that plays out. Okay, things are looking a lot cleaner, a lot nicer, but we're still getting a little bit of floating here and there. And it, obviously for a game like Legion, we don't really want things to be floating in the air. We want things to be as quote unquote realistic as possible. So the reason for that is that we have not selected this non-convex feature. So what this non-convex feature does is that basically by default, Tabletop Simulator will take really complicated shaped objects like this cliff, for instance, and it will essentially try and turn them into blobs to simplify collision detection. This is a performance a reason. There's a lot of good reasons for why it does that. But for our purposes in Legion, we don't want that feature. So what we're going to do is select non-convex, which was basically going to tell Tabletop Simulator, hey, use this exact collider that I gave you as the collision detection. Don't make any sort of extrapolations or assumptions on this. And we're going to hit import. One thing important to note is that the non-convex feature only works as long as that object is locked. So while this object is still unlocked, you'll notice that Luke is still floating in the air here above this object. That's okay. As soon as we lock it, now he's going to start having proper collisions with the cliff here. So that's how you can import go through all the steps to basically go from a custom asset bundle to just a standard custom model for the purposes of Star Wars Legion. So this is really handy for us. Now we can actually use this cliff asset in maps and stuff like that. And I'm actually really excited because this cliff asset is super awesome. So this was a little bit of a simple example. I'm going to now go into a slightly more complicated one. So let's go ahead and I'll just go ahead and run over to kind of show you the workflow that I would be going through if I wanted to be pulling a new asset into a map that I'm creating. So I'm going to go ahead and go to this Sot's Ruin Assets map pack. You can see here all the amazing stuff. There are a few things where the imports have broken now at this point, but you can see here that there's a ton of really awesome assets that we can use in our Star Wars Legion maps. That I mean, this is like a treasure trove of really awesome, like the textures look amazing. They're really high quality. If we could play with these in Legion, that would be amazing. But you'll notice that one of the issues, and this is actually where I also got those cliff assets from, one of the issues with a lot of these assets is, like I said, is that they're all these custom asset bundles, which is a pain in the butt. So we're going to go ahead and use this rounded base preset here as an example for something that's slightly more complicated compared to this cliff asset. So we're going to go ahead and do the same thing here. We're going to copy and paste this link for the custom asset bundle. We're going to go to our browser. We're going to paste the link here. Oops. And we are going to save the file. Go to our downloads now. Let's see. Go to downloads here. I'm just going to rename it. We're going to call it just platform here. Platform. Now we are going to go to uTinyRipper. We're going to click and drag this. Actually, it's here. And then we're going to click and drag this platform file in here. Going to hit exports, go to our asset exports, click OK. And then we're going to go into Unity again, open this Cliff project. Oh, it's already open. Whoops. Go over here. So we can get rid of this object at this point. Let's go back to our base assets folder here and go back to our asset exports, go to platform here. And then we're going to click and drag platform.unity.3D. Or platform.unity3D. So, let's open this all the way down here. Okay, so this, something is a little funky with this. You'll notice that it's only one surface that's being shown on this. So we're going to go ahead and delete this. Let's try the other one instead. Okay, this is what we're looking for here. So you can see that this is the object just without a texture applied. One thing you'll notice is that this is actually a prefab as well. So a prefab in Unity is basically a collection of objects rather than a single object. That's okay. But doing the FBX export, if we try to FBX export from this prefab here, let's just go ahead and do it because go to assets here. I'm going to copy and paste this path here. Select binary. So base rounded presets will just convert there. Let's see if that worked. Go here. Base rounded prefab FBX. Oh, whoops. So it looks like it did actually export, but it's a prefab. So just make sure that you're aware of that. So prefabs can be a little bit weird sometimes. So let's go back over to Blender here. We'll go ahead and delete this because we don't need it anymore. Now we're going to go import FBX and hit the base rounded preset here. Hey, look at that. That's the object that we wanted. So at this point, we're not going to export this as an OBJ file just yet. We have a couple things that we need to do first. And the reason that this one is slightly more complicated is, and I haven't shown you yet why, but if we go into the assets folder and look at the texture 2D files, you will notice that we actually have three texture files for this object. So this file, and this is one of the reasons why it's a custom asset bundle, right? Is that it needs to have multiple texture files, and TTS, when you're doing custom models, only supports, when you're doing a normal custom model here, in TTS, it only supports having a single texture file. So what we need to do here is use Blender to convert those three texture files that are used for this object, and we need to convert those three texture files into a single texture file. And that sounds more complicated than it actually is. So let's go ahead and go back to Blender here. And we are going to go into the UV editing window here. And now we're going to hit tab to go into edit mode here. And you'll notice that this object by default already has some materials and stuff that are preset. You may or may not have those. If you don't have those, you'll have to add some new materials here. It's not a big deal. It's pretty easy to deal with. And like I said, I'm not really intending this to be a whole Blender tutorial, so I would recommend, I'll probably paste some links in the description for this video on various tutorials that you can find out there for Blender on just like getting started with Blender and stuff like that. But anyway, regardless to say that we have three different textures that we need to be applying to this object here. So in Blender, what we're going to do is we're going to go into, let's see, we need to assign our textures first. So first we're going to go into the viewport shading view here. So this is basically going to say that when we have texture applied, it's actually going to render those textures. If we were in the view, I forget, actually, this is the solid mode, sorry, not the solid mode in the material preview. If you're in the solid mode, it's just going to show white blank, slate color the whole time. So you want to make sure that you're getting a material preview. Obviously right now we're not seeing those textures. That's okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to go over here and select face select. And we're going to select all these faces because this is the texture for, if we go back to TTS here. So you'll notice that the three different textures are applied to three different things. We've got the texture applied to the wall itself. So like, this part, etc., all the way around. We've got a texture that's applied to these little column things that are sticking out. And then we've got a texture applied to the floor and to the top and the bottom of it. So if we go back to Blender here, we can see that those materials that have already been preset, that's, it's the portal, the walls, and the floor. So what we need to do is assign those three different materials to their component faces. So we're going to select this, then we're going to hold shift and select these faces. And then we are going to assign that to the floor material. And you'll notice that nothing has happened yet. And the reason for that is that we are just assigning it a white color right now. So we need to go over to base color here, click on base color, click on image texture. And now it's turned black. That's good. We're looking for that. And now we're going to go to open. Remember that folder that I told you to the file path that I told you to save earlier. We're just going to, we'll pull it from we can pull it from the Unity side, that folder, or we can pull it from our downloads folder. So if we go to our asset exports, platform, assets, texture 2D, we can just copy and paste this path here. So we're going to, so this is the floor material. So we're going to use the floor texture file. And hey, look at that. Now we have our floor texture file. You'll notice that in Blender, it's looking a little bit shiny though. And the reason for that is that our material has a specular strength of 0.5. We're going to put that down to 0. And now things are looking a lot better. So now we need to do that for the wall. So we're going to go ahead. Actually, let's go ahead and do the portal first here. So we're going to do this. Yeah. Select all of these. Because the portal is a little bit annoying to do by itself later. So we're just going to select all of this. We're going to assign it to the portal material like we did earlier. Just you have to make sure that you hit assign here. And then we're going to set the specular strength down to 0 and change the texture to an image texture. And we're going to open the texture file, which is over here, and we're going to use portal. So obviously this is the wrong texture file for the walls there, but this one has a lot of more small triangular faces, so it's kind of annoying to select all that stuff around the other big things. So don't worry too much about that, because you can obviously reassign the material. So now we're going to go and we're going to assign our wall here. So we're just going to select all these triangles, select these two, and select these two. And now we are going to assign that to the walls material. So you'll notice that this has changed color now. And so we're going to import the texture here and open that link there. And then we're going to go to wall. Okay. So now actually we haven't finished doing all the specular strength here. And let me just make sure I did that on the portal correctly. Okay. That's looking good. You'll notice though that there is, so that if we go inside this object, we cannot see out of it. And that can lead to some inefficient rendering stuff and whatnot. So actually, one thing that I would recommend that you do, if this is something that would make sense, right, is to enable backface culling on your materials where it doesn't matter. So for this floor, we're going to enable backface culling. And then we're also going to do that for the walls here as well. And basically what this does is that if a camera is ever inside the object, it's basically just not wasting the your graphics rendering process. It's not wasting your computer's processing for rendering the reverse side of what you can't see on this object. So if we didn't have this enabled, even if we were looking at this object from the outside, our computer would still be rendering the inside as well, which is just a waste of processing. And it doesn't make any sense. But we're not actually going to enable backface culling on these little portal things, because you can see that we can actually see both sides of that surface from the outside. So we're gonna leave backface culling enabled on, or we're gonna disable culling for that selection. So anyway, we have our textures assigned here. We have our object looking good. Now, how do we export it? Well, it's a little bit of a complicated process. Well, it's not that complicated, but it's a little bit of a step-by-step. So first thing that we're going to need to do is we're actually going to need to go over to our UV maps, and we're going to need to create a new UV map. And the way that you're going to do that is just hit plus, hit UV map. We're just going to call this UV map bake for our purposes here. Make sure that your UV set, so UV set 0 was the initial UV set that it was using for the initial map that it's using for mapping all these textures. You want to make sure that you've still got this one as the active render. If you switch it to bake, well, bake is technically just a copy of UV set right now, but we're going to be changing bake in a little bit, and then it's going to start looking weird. So make sure that your UV set 0 is set to the active render, but also make sure that you have bake selected here. So this one, you want this one to be the gray selection here. Now we're going to go back to here. We're going to hit tab to go back to object mode. We're going to select this object and, we need to go into edit mode. We're going to hit A to select all faces here. And now we're going to right click, or you can hit U. We're going to go to UV unwrap faces, and then we're going to go to smart UV project. I would recommend probably adding a slight margin to your projection here, and then you're just going to go ahead and hit OK. You may have to adjust this, depending on the object that you're trying to do. So we're going to go ahead and hit OK now. And now you can see here that in our UV editing that we've got something that's looking a lot more like a discernible texture. We've got some stuff for our walls. We've got some stuff for our portals. We've got some stuff for our floors here. So that's looking good. But we still need to bake it to an actual image. So what we're going to go over here is we're going to create a new image, and we're going to call this our baked texture. And we're actually going to change it to 2048. I recommend 2048 by 2048 for TTS. I think you can go higher than that. I think you might be able to do 4096, but it might those high resolution textures can sometimes get a little bit too large, and TTS will complain at you about them. So 2048 by 2048 is I've found that that's a pretty good one to go by. We don't actually need an alpha for this, so we're just going to unselect that. And we're going to go ahead and hit OK here. So now we've got a black image that is showing absolutely nothing. So what we're going to do with this is actually we need to open one more window now, and we're going to go so new window here. Then we are going to go to our shader editor. So we're going to start editing our shaders here for these different materials. So similarly to what, so these are things that were already created on the object, but if they didn't exist, you could create them yourself. So I won't show you how to do that in this tutorial because that would just start taking way too long. But you'll notice that in these slots, these are the same materials that we're looking at over here in this window here. So we're going to edit each of these materials, and what we're going to do is we're going to copy and paste this texture here. And then we are going to select our baked texture. Make sure not to do anything else to mess with it. All you want to do is just copy it and put this baked texture here, because we want to make sure that this is the texture that it's baking to when we're rendering this new texture. Or sorry, this is the file that we're baking to when we're baking this new texture. So we're going to copy and paste this, and then we're going to go into all of our various materials and copy and paste all of those. Make sure that in each of those slots, baked texture is the texture that's selected. You do not want to have this selected or this or anything else. Make sure baked texture is selected here. We're going to go through all these, just make sure that it's selected there. Looking good. Okay. Now we are going to go to our rendering, the render engine here. We're going to go to our object mode. We're going to select this object, and then we are going to go to our cycles. So cycles, we're going to do GPU just because it's slightly faster here. We don't need simple bake. We're going to use bake. And then we are going to use a bake type of diffuse. So we're just looking for the texture. We don't care about light source bouncing or anything like that. We're just going to do a diffuse bake type with no indirect or direct lighting. So it's just the color. That's all we care about. And then we are going to go ahead and hit bake. Let that run for a little second here. Okay. So something is looking a little funky here. I did this incorrectly. Oh, because I'm on the correct. What did I do? Hold, please. Okay, I am not sure why that issue occurred. I think it was because I had done something wrong on my shader editing here. I may have just made this like in the incorrect image or something like that. That was accidentally selected. But basically, as long as you have this baked texture right here and you've got this properly selected, this is also selected through all of the different materials here. And then all you got to do is just, like I said, the steps that I explained before. It's really finicky though. You got to make sure all that stuff is selected properly. All your settings for that image are set properly. But basically, then you're going to hit bake. And then if it worked, if you did it successfully, if you did it properly, it should end up looking like this. So sorry that I wasn't able to get it all in one take to do it perfectly there. But yeah, Blender can be a little bit finicky sometimes, and that's why it can be a little tricky for this. So I'm gonna go ahead and hit bake here just to show you that it works again here, and it's gonna bake over this again. Oh yeah. Okay. So now we have our baked texture. We're gonna go ahead and hit image. We're gonna hit save as, and we're just gonna say we're gonna put it on our downloads folder, and we're just gonna call it our platform texture here. Platform texture. Oh, I guess I already have a file named that, so we're gonna go platform texture 1, and then hit save image here. And then now, like I said before, we didn't export the object earlier, so we're going to need to go ahead and hit export away from object here, and then we'll just do our platform, I don't know, we'll call it 2. I think I already have a platform object, so we're going to export that. And then let's go ahead and jump back over to our TTS here, and components, custom, model here. Go to this model mesh, downloads, hit platform 2, local, diffuse image. We'll use our platform texture, local, and import that. Okay, and then we've just got to fix our material here. Just put this back down to 0. There, imports. All right, there we go. Now we have a custom model that is looking exactly like this. But it's a custom model now, so we can affect the colliders and stuff like that. And then the grid projection should also be working at this point. Yep, so grid projection, if we turn that on compared to this one here, no grid projection on that. Grid projection is working just fine on this one. So I'm gonna go ahead and hit save object here. You can just save it as whatever you want. So save object into I have an exported assets folder, so I'll just call it platform. We'll save that, and then let's just jump back over just to show you that it worked. Jump back over to the Legion mod here, and let's go ahead and paste this in, and then we're gonna go ahead and spawn in some of these deployment zones. This out here, deployment. All right, fingers crossed. There we go. So everything is working now. Okay, so that's pretty much all that I wanted to show off in this video here. It was a little bit long-winded, but I hope that that was really helpful for perhaps working with some objects that you'd really like to use in your TTS maps, but you're having issues because they're custom asset bundles or whatever. Obviously that not everything is going to work exactly like that. You may have to, do some testing and trials with, some maybe, because not every custom asset bundle is gonna have the exact same formatting as these things. But from a general sense, that's kind of how you want to do it. And that's pretty much all that I had for you. Thanks for watching the video. I hope that was useful, and I will see you next time.